Hey guys, it's Faye from Solarflow, and I am back with an all-new Behind the Veil energy read. But this time it's on somebody that I swore I would never give the attention to because she so desperately craved it. Now, this is not to say that I'm a mean-spirited person and I was like, ugh, no, you want attention, I'm not going to give it to you. It's not like that. It's just more like the desperation that clung to this person for me giving the attention to her, clung to her like a cheap cologne. And if you have ever been around somebody that is drenched in cheap cologne, then you know it's not a scent you want to be in. That's how I feel about this kind of energy. It's not an energy that I want to be around. So, although I had been pushing off looking into her, I did at a certain point acquiesce and look into this person's energy. But then once I had looked into her, what had come through, I liked even less. And I was like, I don't want to do a video on this person. Which might leave you wondering why I chose to. And that is because, like most things, including ourselves and a bottle of a good red wine, things take time to breathe. And the longer that bottle of wine is opened, the better the taste will be. The longer we are alive, the more full-bodied we too become. And the longer this person's energy was around me, the more I came to acquiesce and understand there had to be a takeaway from this person's privileged life that was for the collective. So I decided to sit down and meditate again and to look into beyond this person's life, beyond this person's energy. What is the takeaway for the collective? And I found it to be absolutely fascinating. And that is why I agreed to do this video. It was actually a blog post first. However, I do not believe for a moment that all of you, though I love you, and I know you love me too, I do not for a moment be so naive as to believe because I said I wrote a blog post, you guys were going to flock to it en masse. So for those of you that want your video fix, here it is in audio form. So after the longest intro known to mankind, who the hell are we talking about, right? Faye, you have bloviated long enough about why you didn't want to look into this person's energy, but the takeaway for the collective is so fascinating that you decided you were going to do it. Who are we talking about, Faye? And this is none other than Elizabeth Taylor. Now, I'm not entirely sure that Elizabeth Taylor is somebody that needs an introduction per se. However, being that she is somebody that had crossed over 10 years ago, and she is not necessarily our generation kind of a person, the way like a Britney Spears or an Angelina Jolie is, I will do a three-dimensional introduction of her. And this is all information that is easily acquired off of Wikipedia. So who was Elizabeth Taylor? So she was born on February 27th, 1932, and she had passed away on March 23rd, 2011. Elizabeth Taylor was a British and American actress who began her career as a child actress in the early 1940s and then went on to become the world's highest paid movie star in the 1960s. Now, in addition to that, she's also known for her very opulent and over-the-top lifestyle, as well as the fact that she was married 8 times to 7 men. That means she remarried one of her husbands for a second time. She was married 8 times. Notable, one could say. Now, she did die of, let's see, Wikipedia. She had died of congestive heart failure in 2011 at the age of 79 years old. And now that we have covered that three-dimensional information, let's get into the behind the veil energy reading. Now, as an energy reader, I'm also going to share with you that being an energy reader provides a window into the soul of the subject that we are looking into. And I'm also going to remind you that, of course, I have to get the person's consent prior to me connecting to and reading their energy. So while there are some people that are shy, and it may take going to their energy more than one time to connect to it, or there are perhaps people that are more than happy to talk with me, there's also people that I kind of have to hang around, maybe knock on the metaphorical door once or twice. But then there's the Elizabeth Taylors. And this is a woman that was so enthusiastic to have her energy read that she interrupted me. Yes, she interrupted me while I was trying to connect to the energy of Elvis Presley. And if you have seen the video on Elvis, excellent, by the way, highly recommend going back and seeing it if you haven't. But if you've seen that video, then you know at the beginning of it, I had shared that his energy was not someone that was easy to track down. And he is the first and only person whose energy was so hard to connect to. Yes, some people, maybe they don't want to come to the door. Yes, there are some people who they'll come to the door and they'll say, not today, Faye, not today. But to have the energy of somebody be so difficult to even track down in the first place, very unusual. And the reason that I stuck with it was the thrill of the hunt. Because again, I'm not somebody as an energy reader that can't connect to energy. So the fact that his energy just wasn't coming through, it was a challenge. It wasn't like I'm standing on somebody's doorstep, knocking on the door, and they're upstairs hollering down, I'll be down in a minute. It's kind of like their car is in the driveway, all the lights are on, I had just texted with them and I said I'm on my way, and then I'm at the door, I'm knocking on the door, and they're not there. Do you think I would just turn around and leave? No. So I was so committed to connecting to his energy that I really stuck with it. And in that time, while I was trying to actively hunt down and connect to his energy, Elizabeth Taylor casually, if you will, in modern day to speak, slid into my DM. Or another way of saying that is, despite me showing absolutely no interest in connecting to her energy, she connected to me. Because after all, why wouldn't I want to read her energy? The idea that I wouldn't was so utterly preposterous to her that she was, in her opinion, really doing me a favor by connecting to me without me going through the trouble of actually having to look for her. This is really the way she thought. So Elvis would wait for another day, because it's not every day that, first and foremost, an energy reader gets to connect to a legend such as Elizabeth Taylor, and begrudgingly without actually having to do any of the legwork of trying to hunt them down and see if they even wanted to talk. So I decided that Elvis would wait, and I humored Miss Taylor. And the very, very first thing that she wanted acknowledged was her beauty. Even now, from the other side, she is still so taken in with herself and her beauty that it was the very first topic she chose to discuss with me. And I'm going to be very candid with you guys. Being a child of the 80s, I did not grow up with having any reference of this supposed beauty that Elizabeth Taylor wanted recognized. Because I grew up seeing maybe photos of her in the rag mags, or maybe photos of her showing up to some sort of a charity event and it was discussed on the news. And she was heavyset. And she was sporting this kind of weird Miami tan where it looked like she had been out in the sun for a little bit too long, but it wasn't quite a burn. Or maybe it was like a sunburn that now had finally turned into a tan. She was too dark. And she was wearing way too much blue eyeshadow. And she was wearing a miu-miu because she was heavyset. So I really had no reference to the supposed beauty that she wanted recognized. But if I stopped and I actually thought back, I could vaguely recall seeing photos of her when she had played the role of Cleopatra. And this is a role in which she, from at least my opinion, looked the most magnificent. She was striking and statuesque and with a somewhat otherworldly air about her. So what happened to her, I wondered? What happened to the beautiful, otherworldly, statuesque Elizabeth from days of yore that she had turned into the heavyset, too much blue eyeshadow woman? But never you mind that. She directed my attention away as she wanted me to see her beauty, and she wanted to be remembered for it. So I obliged, and I left the question behind, and this made Elizabeth immensely happy. And energetically, she bloomed like a flower in opening up and sharing everything with me. Now, she had shared, as I just stir my tea here, she had shared that she had always been beautiful, even as a child. By the way, I also did that just to pause for dramatic effect. I really do have tea here, but I also thought it would be, a little bit more dramatic if I paused there. So she had always been beautiful, even as a child. And with her natural good looks came a kind of petulance that one being born pretty and without a shred of self-consciousness can have. But not only was she beautiful, she knew it too. And she knew all she had to do was open her big eyes and flash a smile, and like a warm knife sliding through butter, did the will of those around her collapse, even as a child. Therefore, little Miss Thing did not develop proper discipline, drive, motivation, or a sense of responsibility, as those were quickly outsourced to the people who turned into puddles of melted butter around her. People just wanted to do things for her if it meant they could be close to her. She was that magnetic, even as a child. So now then, imagine when she was older, how the will of men caved to her as she was an object of their sexual desire. They were done, stupefied by her turning her electric gaze upon them. And she used her good looks to her advantage, flirting to get what she wanted, or even toying with the emotions of men out of boredom. Now, this is not to say that she lacked empathy, because she could be quite warm and charitable, and a great number of people would call her a friend. It's just to say that little Miss Liz failed to expand and evolve all parts of herself. Because from her point of view, why bother? She was loved and admired just for existing and could easily flirt to get what she wanted. So why apply effort to anything that wasn't that easy? Laziness ensued. Not just physical laziness, as she had a willing coterie orbiting around and living in service to her, but a kind of malaise of character. Because nice as she was not particularly deep, and she had no great accomplishments other than being born beautiful. So to that end, she really only enjoyed herself when receiving attention from others, and in the absence of them, she sometimes felt she herself failed to exist. And thus boredom grew when there was no one else around, and toying with men was done to alleviate her boredom. That is, until she genuinely began fancying them. And she loved the rush of a new crush and the initial giddy excitement that she would feel. She loved how the air around her felt electric and how alive she felt. Boredom was alleviated, and she would devote every waking minute to being the best version of Elizabeth Taylor that she could be. And she was at her energetic peak when she was with a new man. And to varying degrees, that would last or not last, depending on how much attention and affection was given to her. But once the rush was gone, she was left energetically depleted and longed for another someone new. She was addicted to the feeling of falling in love, but not to love itself. And once the relationship ended, boredom ensued again. So she'd quickly partner up again to relieve the boredom and to satiate her energetic needs, until the rush was gone again. And without an internal world and a core essence to retract into, she continued to repeat the cycle again and again. In essence, monkey vining from relationship to relieve the boredom in the absence of having anything fundamental inside of herself to regulate her sense of value and worth. She was a beautifully packaged but equally empty ping-pong ball in human form. And having always relied on her beauty, getting old was very difficult for Elizabeth. She had not invested in her body nor her health and had become the aforementioned memory of the Elizabeth Taylor of my youth. And the physical manifestation of her laziness dripped in jewels with a string of short-lived marriages and paramours of the past left behind her like two heavy suitcases to carry. And despite her waning beauty, She'd still make an occasional public appearance to get a quick fix of adoration and attention, filling up on as much as she could before retreating back to the shadows, all while failing to notice the shaking of heads and bewilderment as people questioned what had happened to the once beautiful Elizabeth Taylor. She was just so beautiful. People would say, as they concluded, she must have just let herself go. And part of it is that she did let herself go. But that's only on the surface. And if we have learned anything from Elizabeth Taylor, it's that the surface is not a great place to reside. So while it would be very easy to conclude and explain away that she was just rich, lazy, and enjoying her golden years, as an energy reader, I would be doing a disservice to you by not exploring the soul, energetic, or spiritual component that was playing out behind the veil. So what do we see when we peel back that 3D veil? And it's that Elizabeth Taylor was living in denial of her true self. She was also ignorant to her gifts and abilities and completely outsourced herself to others. So let's break this down and see what we can learn from her. So first and foremost, Elizabeth was a seeker of love, but a lover of no one. She jumped from person to person like criminals jumping subway cars to evade police. And she did this because she was uncomfortable being by herself and with the absence of experiencing self-love. She chased love. She was the leaking water bottle I frequently talk about in my videos. But instead of her being the person that was carrying a water bottle with a hole in it and not noticing it, and therefore every time they reach for their water, they're complaining, I don't know what's wrong with my water bottle, because every time I reach for it, there's just never water here. There's just never enough water. So she was not the person toting the leaky water bottle. She actually was the leaking water bottle. And she never truly loved another because she didn't love herself. Love was something experienced externally through the adulation and attention foisted upon her by others, but it was never actually something that she experienced internally herself. Now, Elizabeth also had many gifts bestowed upon her in this incarnation as Elizabeth Taylor. First and foremost, she was indeed beautiful. She was also alluring, funny, generous, and incredibly creative. Plus, there are the environmental gifts the universe delivered to her. So while her beauty was undeniably a gift, but due to her over-identification of it, she did not develop a core identity in tandem with it. Therefore, her life played out like the movies she starred in, experienced solely through the reaction and response of others, and in believing herself to be the characters she played, she failed to exist without it. And in the absence of the attention, she lacked the ability to generate her own internal energy. So if you will, Elizabeth Taylor was like a lizard. She needed to lay out in the sun to generate warmth. But it was not warmth she needed, nor the sun. It was actually attention from others. Those that gave her, therefore, the most love received the most back in return. But it was nothing more than the boomerang of energy coming back around to them. For this reason, people loved to be around Elizabeth Taylor, as they actually felt their own love recycled through Elizabeth and reflected back at them. Now, every romantic relationship she was in was also a gift, but she treated them like disposable tissues to be used and discarded until she needed another. Therefore, all of her romantic partnerships were transient and devoid of depth, much like Liz herself. Now, her wealth was also a gift, but it was only a gift because she was a vibrational match with it, because that is how she viewed herself. Obsessed with the 3D and her self-identification as an object. Thus, she could only be a vibrational match for other objects, of which she accumulated a great many. Because like attracts like. If you want to know who someone is, look at the reality around them. Because wealth and the accumulation of stuff is only a sign of success in the material world. And that was Elizabeth Taylor's domain, the 3D. And therefore, Elizabeth Taylor was a soul living out of alignment. And that, therefore, is what makes her qualified to hold up a mirror for the collective to explore what we value. And what is truly important to us, and maybe more importantly, what is our actual place in the world. Because though she be a woman of the not too distant past, her life bears a striking resemblance to the values playing out in the modern day world, of which I will outline a few. Number 1, hookup culture over meaningful relationships. Number 2, excessive adoration of the self and rise of narcissism via social media. Number 3, the drive to accumulate stuff at the expense of personal development. Number 4, obsession with Hollywood and celebrities. Number 5, being overweight is considered healthy. Number 6, the abdication of personal responsibility. And finally, number 7, outsourcing personal power to the collective. So while there was only one Elizabeth Taylor, you can insert almost anyone alive today in her life, and it would be the same person with the same broken values. She was perhaps the pioneer. She was a Kardashian before the Kardashians. And if you have ever played Oregon Trail growing up, you know many followed. though it be treacherous and full of potential calamities. But you know what? Living out of alignment in 2023 is full of potential calamities. So the takeaway in the dimmed light of the life of Elizabeth Taylor is that bright stars burn the fastest, leaving us in the dark to be the light. Because though the world now feels dark because of our lost values and lack of societal alignment, be the light. You be the light. When your friends around you are drinking alcohol, vaping, or doing drugs, be the light. When smash and grab culture has become the norm, be the light. When people around you are making decisions out of fear and not love, be the light. So whatever is playing out around you in the world at large, be the light. Because from the light that is you, you can draw from it, create, evolve, and expand past it, past the dark. So that book you've always wanted to write, write it. That job you want to quit, quit it. That YouTube channel you want to start, start it. Because living out of alignment in 2023 is full of potential calamities. And the only way to combat the dark is by being the light. So be the light and shine on, you crazy diamond. So that is my Behind the Veil energy read on Elizabeth Taylor and the bigger picture takeaway for all of society. And as always, I hope that you guys have found this video to be interesting or thought-provoking, and take what resonates, leave the rest behind, and as always, stay in the high vibration.